Stanford, UChicago, Ashoka, and now entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
How do people get into these colleges? What are they looking for?
They don't want another brick in the wall. You have to be distinctive.
Going to Stanford to study, to the US, it's an expensive place, and studying art history.
Yeah.
Majority of Indian parents will not allow you to do that. What is the role of parents in this journey?
If you just nurture the drive, they'll succeed.
Now let's walk into Stanford. So how did that feel? How were the first few days?
That was actually some of the craziest moments. Work with what you have and really emphasize kind of what makes you different.
Do you think it was worth it? The money, getting into Stanford, going to the US. What do you think people get that they can't get in India?
It's basically resources.
What are some of the crazy things that you've seen? Might not be good, might be good.
Definitely a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, that's there.
A lot of students in India want to go abroad for their undergrad and masters. And they want to go to top colleges. Colleges like Harvard, Stanford are big in people's names. But how do you get into these colleges? Are they worth it? The amount of money you spend to get into these colleges, is it really worth? Is it value for money? To understand all this, today we have a very special guest in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. So you went to Stanford for your college.
Yeah.
And you did your undergrad at Stanford and then masters at UChicago. And now you're becoming an entrepreneur, helping a lot of young students, high school students, get into these colleges. So I'm really excited. I'm really interested to understand from you, A, how did you get into these colleges? B, what was your journey like when you were at college? And C, how do people make it? If today there are students in high school who want to get into these colleges, what should they do to get in? Right. What are these colleges looking for? And finally, how do you become successful at college? Right? Ultimately, if you are in the US, it's a different planet. There are a lot of things that are happening which Indian students are not used to. How do they deal with that? I'm sure there are good things and bad things. So let's start with your journey. Where are you coming from? How did you get into these colleges?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Neeraj. It's wonderful to be here. So I grew up in Mumbai. I went to the same high school from the lower kindergarten years till the end of the 12th grade, which was the Bombay International School. I changed boards 3 times within that school because that was around the time when these new international boards were coming in. So I did the ICSE until the 8th grade, and then we had IGCSE for 9th and 10th, and then we had the IB for 11th and 12th. And so it was an interesting time where our school was kind of bringing these things in, and we were all kind of figuring out together what these boards are and what critical thinking is and kind of how to choose subjects and, get ready for life beyond that. After I went to the Bombay International School, I went to Stanford University and I majored in art history there. My family comes from, it's a very artistic family. My mother is a great dancer and singer. My sister is a dancer. My uncle has a PhD in English literature and we live together as well. And my dad is a voracious reader. So the conversation about the value of the arts and in particular the value of preserving Indian arts and culture was kind of all over my house. So I think that really informed me. When I went to college, I started off in the art history major and I realized that, the department that I had at Stanford in art history was very focused on American art, which wasn't something that I was very familiar with or that really moved me that much. I got very lucky because in the 3rd year of Stanford, so just about halfway through is kind of where I began to make the most of Stanford much more. So just, one other point is that you might at some point during your 4 years of college really begin to understand what college is like and how to make the most of it. You don't necessarily go in knowing kind of what to do there. So I took a class on ancient Greek art, and in that art there were stories of heroes from the Trojan War, and there was all these other kinds of myths and these fantastical creatures all coming in. And the questions that all these stories were raising were, who are you? What do you want from life? What is the right thing to do? What does it mean to have courage? And these are the questions that really interested me. So I went on to pursue them also by studying religion, and I did a minor in religion as well. After I was done with college, I really didn't know what to do. I had a bunch of courses from all these different subjects. I had some courses in biology and economics and math, and I had, of course, my art history and religious studies courses, and I was like, I have no idea what to do next. I'd enjoyed my time, I'd definitely grown, but there was no clear sense of what I should do next, and there wasn't really any career guidance that I had during college to figure that out as well. I think this is something that people should know. Just because you get into a good college doesn't mean that you're going to know what to do after college, and doesn't mean that you are going to get a job after college. So when I was graduating, I was applying for jobs frantically. I didn't get anything. And I really felt like I had two options. Either I become a professor in this art, history, religion field, which would involve sitting in a library every day for 5 to 6 hours at least and talking to highly specialized people and learning old languages like ancient Tamil. Or I could become an entrepreneur and do something of my own. And that is what I decided to do. So once I made that decision, I knew that I wanted to continue doing some academic work because I would be an entrepreneur within education, and I wanted to understand what research is like, because without that understanding, it's hard to create educational products, especially if they're about helping students transition from school to college. So I did my master's in religion at the University of Chicago, did an education certification as well, and I came back to India after that. Tried to think about this company I wanted to start, which would help students go from India to college in the US or some other institutions in India as well. I just felt like I didn't have the market experience or really the understanding of students in terms of their mindsets. So I took a job up at Ashoka University where I worked in the office of high school programs, and I learned a lot about the industry and how to navigate the workplace there. And now I'm starting up a company of my own.
Wow. So high school, Stanford, UChicago, Ashoka, and now entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
That's what you're doing.
yeah.
So let's start with, how did Stanford take you in? Like, what does it take to get into a Stanford?
Right. You know, the other day, actually, I was having a conversation about this with three of my friends who also went to Stanford with me, and it was kind of a live webinar that we did. And we came up with a few key takeaways. I think one thing that is important to realize is that academics and test scores are important. But once you hit a sort of threshold of that, then it's all about the distinguishing factors that you have, which separate you from other people who get those scores. So if you have, say, a 1450, 1500 on your SAT, just by the way, I got a 32 on my ACT, which is very low compared to what people normally say you need to get into Stanford. It's fine. You might have one or two weak spots, even in the academic components of your application, but work with what you have and really emphasize kind of what makes you different. In terms of some specific things that Stanford looks for, I think it looks for an immense amount of passion. You have to be completely obsessed with something in order to get into Stanford. In my case, I was obsessed with cooking. I wrote my entire college application on cooking, my common application on cooking. I spoke about how in the kitchen I feel a certain kind of freedom and ability to be creative and authentic, and that's what I want to feel. And I knew that Stanford is a place, because it nurtures creativity, freedom, authenticity, would be a place that would recognize me as, thriving there. I also did a couple of other projects also related to cooking and art, because I was applying for art history. So I wrote a short little book in which I took different food items from different restaurants that looked really beautiful, and I analyzed them from an artistic standpoint. And that's not something that most career counselors or college counselors will tell you to do, right? Like, which career counselor is going to say you should write a book on food presentation, and
Right.
you'll get into Stanford because of that.
Right.
But I think it's precisely because it's not something that is already a box to tick that it stands out so much, and if it's good quality, then Stanford will recognize it.
Right.
Also, by the way, I worked as an admissions associate at Stanford for 2 years, and I know for a fact that, at one level, of course, they screen a bunch of applicants and they say, okay, these people are not kind of meeting the bar. We won't get into that. But the applicants that they are seriously considering to bring in, they look at everything about you. So if you've done a project, they will read the full project, so you can't kind of bullshit your way through that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So 32 in ACT,
Yeah.
IB student.
Yeah.
Score in IB.
45.
So now, so you were not like a mediocre student. A 45 on 45 in IB is not easy.
Yeah.
Okay. So 32 in ACT, 45 in IB. These extracurriculars, which brought cooking and your love for art
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're applying for art history.
Right.
And then you get into Stanford. Now let's walk into Stanford. So how did that feel? How were the first few days? Did you see what you expected, or was it very different? How's the experience of those 4 years?
Honestly, that you're bringing me back to those first few days, that was actually some of the craziest moments. I'll tell
Okay.
you about 3 people I met, and all of them are completely insane, and they're still my very, very good friends. The way it works is if you're an international student, you get to college early.
Okay.
Because you have your international student orientations and stuff like that. So there's no Americans on campus except the athletes. Because they have come in early to do their team building and training and things like that. So the first person I met at Stanford was a 6'2" white American woman called Alexis. And I was like really small compared to her. And I was like, is this the type of people who are going to be at Stanford? And it's not even a man who I would normally expect to be so much larger than me. It's someone who's a woman who can beat me up. Then I was like, okay, fine. Like, these are just, the athletes. The other Americans are going to be like kind of fine. Come to the day when the Americans come in, and I have a friend called Eric who is jacked, like absolutely gigantic, and he's so loud and kind of like really assertive, very friendly guy. But I was like, oh my God, like there's no way I'm going to survive here. Like, this is insane. I feel like a little puppy in front of these people. So that was definitely something that I had to like kind of figure out, like right as when I got in. And then I met my friend called Bitia. She's from Ethiopia, and she is frankly the most interesting person I know in the world right now.
Wow.
She, went to Stanford. We had this kind of year-long humanities program that we were both in. That many science students and people like that were also in, and she refused to write in the program. So she was like, I can talk, I can debate about philosophy, and the professors loved her because she was the best in class, but she submitted 0 papers. So they had to fail her. So I guess when I went to Stanford, I saw these 3 people who were so different from me.
Yeah.
And then I really had to ask myself, like, who am I? Like, who am I?
Right.
I have no idea. Because it seems like there's a lot of more different ways to be a human than I was exposed to growing up.
Okay. So those are things you did. Now, clearly, a student who's an IB student going to Stanford to study to the US, it's an expensive place, and is studying art history.
Yeah,
Majority of Indian parents will not allow you to do that.
right,
So clearly, your parents were not a part of the majority.
Right.
Or you were too aggressive and radical and said, I don't care about what you think. So, what is the role of parents in this journey, especially Indian parents, and how we bring up our children? What would be your advice for parents on how to deal with, encourage, help, navigate, guide your high schoolers, your teenagers, to help them get into great colleges, but also to help them become good, solid individuals
yeah.
as they grow up?
I think it's really important to empower students to play to their strengths. And I think that if you help a student play to their strengths and take risks and be creative and really try to do what they are good at and like doing and add value to society, if you just nurture the drive, they'll succeed. So, for example, I did art history at Stanford, but now I'm running a company that offers educational programs to high school students, and there's no way my curriculum, I could have designed it without that degree. And that curriculum makes me very distinctive from what else is there. So there is a way to make any major lucrative. So I don't think that we should kind of buy into this myth that if you do a certain major, there's going to be no money for it. Yes, it's true that there might not be good, well-paying jobs for it, but that doesn't mean you can't start your own company.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't do your own thing. So I think that is really important. I'll tell you a funny story about, getting into Stanford and my parents' role in that. So my parents did not care about my parents were completely uninvolved in my education because I was just really, really self-motivated. And even, I started doing well in school in the 10th grade, but before that I was pretty bad at school. But even then they didn't care. So I remember once we went to my college counselor, and both my parents came for that meeting because they were like, oh, okay, like this is a really big decision. I was like, suddenly, why are you so involved in my education? You've never been involved earlier. But I was like, okay. So we went there, and my college counselor was saying that, you have 2 options. Either you can apply ED to Brown and Columbia, one of the 2, and you'll probably get in. Or you can apply EA to Stanford, which is a risk. Now, if you apply EA to Stanford, then your ED thing is going to go. And then if you don't get into Stanford, then you'll have to apply regular to Columbia or Brown, and
Right.
then the chances are lower. So it was a risk to apply early to Stanford. And I was like, I think I want to go for it. I didn't even know anything about Stanford. I was just like, this is the best one, so I'll just try. Like, why not?
Right.
And my dad on the way back was like, this is ridiculous. How can you think of applying to Stanford? You know the risks, and your college counselor said that go into a room. And I mean, the college counselor said that it's a shot in the dark to get into Stanford. So my dad was like, oh, like go into a room, turn the lights off, take a gun and shoot a bullet, see where it lands. That's a shot in the dark. How can you take that risk? And I was like, Papa, honestly, like this is like really not being, this is not productive. I am applying to Stanford, and like I'll manage the risks of getting in or not getting in. So, I mean, sometimes it just takes going against your parents, honestly. And I think from the parent standpoint, it takes, trusting your child.
I guess it's also about how driven do you think your child is?
Yeah.
How mature is the child? And is that radical decision they're taking a Stanford versus Brown, or is it something really stupid? So you're saying parents do play a role.
Yeah, I think they do. Like Stanford looks for risk takers. Stanford looks for people with guts. If you don't have guts, you're not going to get into Stanford. So, as much as parents might think that let's kind of control the risks, by doing that, you might actually be working against your student's application.
Right, right. I agree. Totally agree. Coming back to life at Stanford, right? So you spent 4 years studying at Stanford. Do you think it was worth it? The money, getting into Stanford, going to the US. So first is very simple, yes or no. Do you think it was worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely worth it.
Okay.
In terms of the money, it was obviously a lot of money.
Sure.
But I think it's put me in a position of knowledge and confidence that assures me that I'll be able to make it back.
Right.
In terms of experiences, definitely something I would recommend. Not necessarily going to Stanford in particular, but I think overall the idea of just going out of your comfort zone, that can happen in India too. But if you go to the US, then it's definitely a larger shift because there are many fewer people like you there. And I think it's just important at that age to be thrown into a situation where you have to figure things out for yourself and learn how to be headstrong.
Okay, okay. So you're saying it's worth it, there is benefit and all that. Any tangible reasons or examples that you can quote why you think going to the US and studying in a top college in Stanford or whatever, Brown or Columbia or any of these, or any of the good colleges in the US, what do you think people get that they can't get in India, or which is really something very unique in these colleges?
I'd say two things. I mean, I'd say actually one thing. It's basically resources, and that can be in the form of humans, and that can also be in the form of kind of labs and things like that. So I'll give you an example of a class I took at Stanford, which I just cannot imagine any other place that I would have taken that class. It was my senior year. I was about to graduate. I had completed my requirements and I had a little bit of flexibility on what new stuff I could do. I found a class on surgery, which was in the human biology department. And the class basically involved actually cutting up a cadaver.
No way.
Yeah, like we had a cadaver.
But you were an art history student.
Yeah.
Where does a cadaver come in?
Well, I think artists for all of human history have been trying to understand and depict the human body and how our bodies change when we feel different emotions, right?
So you can do a course which is as diverse as that.
I remember walking into that class, and the first thing that was there was the smell of formaldehyde, which is the chemical in which the cadavers are kept. And I was like, okay, like this is actually real. Then I go in, and there are bodies laying on tables around the entire room. And someone tells me that, okay, you have to go to this table. So I go to that table, and there's a cadaver. The head of the person is covered. And we're told that this is an 80-year-old man who died of cancer, lung cancer, because he was a smoker. And around me are 5 human biology students who are doing this class, and together we're going to cut up this body. We started with the chest. So, so we were given literally like something like a chainsaw, and we had to cut through the sternum and kind of take that apart. And then we had to extract the lungs so that we could see kind of what the lung looks like. That was the whole point of the class, not just to know how to cut the body, but also to see all the parts of the body. And the rest of the class, they were all working on different bodies, and they had finished, cutting up the body and taking out the lung, but we were taking so long to do it, and we just couldn't figure out why. The professors couldn't figure out why. Like, we had just no idea. And actually what it turned out was that because this person was a smoker, his lungs had become so large in order to kind of help him survive, that it had just filled up his entire chest.
Oh.
So we took out one lung, which was the more diseased lung, and it just crumbled in our hands. It was really bad, really bad. Gray, purple, liquidy. It was a fluid-based cancer. And the other lung was, I kid you not, 3 times the size. And this was a scrawny old man. It was 3 times the size. It was this big of some of the other lungs that we saw, because it was doing all the work that the other lung couldn't do. So that was crazy. Like, that was actually crazy. So classes like that, things you can't get, I think, elsewhere. Definitely not if you're not, doing bio, for example. I mean, I did art history. That was completely insane. I was the only art history student there. I was the only non-bio student there.
Wow.
And then I think in terms of people, universities are called universities because they study various aspects of the universe, I guess. So that includes kind of every aspect of what it means to be a human and live in this world. So they study human behavior, they study the material world around us through the physical sciences, they study how to create products and solutions, etc. So no matter what you do in your life, you will benefit from having people who are at the cutting edge of thinking about various issues. For me, I work in education, and I actually get a double benefit of this, because firstly, the educational programs I offer cover multiple different subjects. So I know a lot of people who went to Stanford and other places like that who can teach on them. And secondly, I also know people in Stanford and other places like that who actually study education. So they research, this intervention leads to this rise in learning outcome, this intervention leads to a higher amount of motivation in a student, etc. And they can actually help me improve my products a lot. So I think the R&D perspective is really, really important. Even if you watch Shark Tank, the US, for example, when a company says that they're spending a lot of money on R&D, it's kind of excusable, because that's the distinguishing factor. No one else has that research, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. When students are going abroad to these colleges, parents are scared, everybody's scared, it's a different country, there are, people will have drugs here, or whatever, good and bad things will happen. What are some of the crazy things that you've seen? Might not be good, might be good, doesn't matter, might be fun, but some of the crazy experiences or crazy things that people will experience when they go into these colleges?
I mean, definitely a lot of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I mean, that's there, no doubt about it. And, there's a lot of people out there who can do a bunch of that stuff and be good in class and do really well academically and get the right jobs and things like that. There's also people who kind of, lose it a little bit, and they kind of, if you smoke too much weed, you probably lose a sense of who you are, and you kind of get a bit detached from reality.
Yeah.
And college is stressful, and people can go to weed and things like that in order to reduce the stress, but actually it makes things worse.
Right.
So there are people with a lot of potential who I saw going down the wrong direction, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's really important when you're in college to be able to sort of figure out, if you are engaging in those activities, like how much and how it's affecting you, and just have that sort of perspective.
Right, right. So it's important to be balanced, keep your focus on, remember why you are at college,
Yeah.
the amount of effort, money, time that is going into doing it. Have fun, but don't forget your focus, and don't get so distracted into anything that just takes your life away.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, as you said earlier, Neeraj, you're going there for opportunities. And some of those opportunities you build for yourself through great social relationships.
Right.
So you have to have fun. It's like really, really important.
Right.
My friends from college are the ones who are supporting me the most now when it comes to the work I'm doing, and vice versa. But you also have to know that some of your opportunities have nothing to do with anyone else, and just to do with you and your work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I've heard about something called the full moon in the quad of Stanford. What is that?
Yeah, so Full Moon on the Quad, oh wow, it is such a throwback actually. So it is an event in the main quad of Stanford, the main kind of quadrangle area. I think specifically for freshmen and sophomores, where it's basically a kissing party.
A kissing
So a
party.
kissing party, yeah. So I think around midnight on a full moon night towards the end of your first quarter at Stanford, so just before you come back home for winter break, all these American and international and God knows where these people come from go into the main quad and you just have to kiss people. And I remember I had this really strange memory where one of my friends like brought me up to someone and introduced me to them as though I wanted to kiss them. And then I didn't, and they wanted to kiss me, and because I didn't know what else to do, I did it. And I was like, oh my God, like I hate you to the person who actually brought me there.
Right,
So
right.
yeah,
Right.
it's kind of a crazy time. Yeah.
Right. So there is a lot of stuff that happens, and some is just fun, and some is dangerous. I mean, getting too distracted into, like you said, weed and those kind of things
Yeah.
can be bad. But at the same time, the opportunities are phenomenal.
Yeah.
The learning opportunities are phenomenal, and I'm assuming that my learning is that they're not comparable to what you can get in many of the Indian colleges. I mean, there are great colleges in India too, so not taking away from that, but opportunities in these colleges are definitely worth putting in all the effort for.
Yeah, and I really hope that Indian colleges can build these opportunities for students, and I'm really excited to see where that goes.
Right, and I think there is effort out there. There is the Ashokas and Kriyas of the world which are doing their best, and they'll get there someday. But I think the Stanfords of the world still remain world leaders. How do people get into these colleges? You also spend time in the admissions office at Stanford, and what are they looking for when they're looking for students? And in high school, what do students need to do, especially Indian international students? What do they need to do so they can get into these colleges?
Right. I mean, every college counselor will tell you, and I completely agree, is that the admissions officer needs to concretely imagine you on campus, contributing to the community and thriving. You can't contribute to campus culture unless you have a unique perspective. It's just completely impossible because then you're just there kind of floating around another brick in the wall, as Pink Floyd says, right? They don't want another brick in the wall. You have to be distinctive. Now, the way we often approach sort of profile building is that we say, okay, you have to do a research paper, you have to do some creative project, you have to develop a product for society, you have to do some social impact work, you have to do an internship. Yes, you have to do some of these things. I don't think you have to do all, firstly. But what's more important than actually doing it is like choosing the right topic for it and explaining why, even if you can't do it now, at Stanford, why you would want to do something on this topic.
Right.
So you have to get the right topic, right? Because that is what your interest is. And that is what they're looking for. So a well-defined set of interests and a self-understanding of your strengths is the most important.
Right.
I don't think execution matters as much as inquiry
Right.
at the high school stage.
And my question, concern, learning there has been that for most of the Indian students, teenagers, they when you ask them what is your area of passion, your interest, a lot of them don't have one.
Yeah.
Right? It's all blinkered by teachers, parents with the right
Definitely.
intention. I'm not saying anybody has the wrong intention, but it's all about do this, this, and this, focus on this, go do computer science. So if somebody really is interested in art history, it's almost ridiculed and
Yeah.
brought down and all that. So and on top of that, that's how our society is. That's how our schools are, where people, if you live in the blinkered tunnel, then you get more respect. You just get marks, and that's all that is required. How do people find that passion? And that should take us to what you're planning to do. But
Yeah.
is that the biggest challenge that people have, you think?
I think it's important to expose high schoolers to people who are doing things that are unique and that they're very, very passionate about and actually adding value to society. So, for example, if a high schooler has a vague interest in art, then we just tell them that, oh, maximum you'll become an artist or you'll become
Yeah.
a museum curator.
Yeah.
और मतलब ऐसे कुछ हो जाएगा. But if you meet someone who's actually working in a museum, trying to ensure that the way we depict Indian artifacts is not through a colonial lens, but rather as something that really represents the rich thought that is, kind of in those artifacts, then that's a political point, and we need those points to be made in society. It completely changes how people understand India, etc. And that's just India. There's hundreds and hundreds of items that the British Museum holds that they have looted from Africa. Getting a degree in art history, working in a museum to fix that or at least address that is extremely socially valuable and also potentially lucrative. So we don't have a sense, I think, as Indian parents today of what types of work students can do. And I think so they're not in the best position to give advice on, what you can do. The best people to give advice are people who are actually doing those things. And I think it's really important to do that at an early stage. Because only at an early stage, once you come up with okay, your interests, then you can do your research paper you can choose your research paper topic or your project topic or your extracurriculars, etc., all based on that.
Okay, so now let's come to what you're planning to do, because I'm very excited about your venture and Reco Education.
Yeah.
So tell me about Reco Education and how are you planning to, after your Stanford UChicago journey, come back to India and help high schoolers find their passion?
Right.
What is Reco Education all about?
So Reco is offering a program for high schoolers called Finding Your Academic Purpose. And I think there's two really key things about this program that I'd like to speak about. So one is the concept of the curriculum, and the second is the format of the program itself.
Okay.
So starting off with the concept, the program is about helping you connect the dots between your academics, the real world, and you.
Okay.
These three things are not separate from each other. The choices that you make in terms of the topics you want to do research on, the projects you want to do, the extracurriculars you want to do, everything you want to say to a college should be about how you see connections between your studies, the real world, and your own story.
Okay.
So that is kind of what we do. So the modules that we have involve introspection, which is about you. It involves case study analysis of real world social problems in areas like economic inequality, diversity and discrimination, environmental change, which are all about the real world. And it also involves kind of actual research, so which is the academic element. So building fundamental skills in reading, interpreting graphs, understanding scientific evidence, and then actually drawing from research in different fields to tackle social problems. We try to bring all those things together. And the format of the program, I think, is really, really cool. Normally, and I'm kind of sick of this, to be honest, when you're in college, you will attend lectures. So it's important to know what lectures are like, where you're sitting in a group of 100 people, etc. And in college, you will also work one-on-one with some professors to write research papers. So it's valuable to have that type of experience at the high school level too.
Sure.
But the most exciting part about college is the seminar-style classroom, where you're sitting in a group of 16 or so, and you have a text in front of you, or a concept in front of you, or a very controversial argument in front of you, and you're all debating back and forth, but no, I think it's like this, no, I think it's like that. Maybe this is what he meant, here is the evidence. That back and forth of debate in that classroom and the thriving energy that has is a social, intellectual experience that is currently not at all available to high schoolers, especially when it's led by faculty, etc. We need to create spaces like that for high schoolers so they get a sense, firstly, of what the college seminar-style classroom looks like, because that's going to be a bulk of what they are going to be expected to participate well in college. And of course, if they're going to be expected to participate well in that, then the admissions officers are also trying to see whether the student can actually do that or not. So you should have some experience with that before you go. Like every high schooler has friends with whom they have different types of conversations. And some of the conversations you have with friends are about TV and about gossip and about random stuff and being stupid. And all of that's a lot of fun. And you also have conversations with maybe the same group of friends, which are about politics, which are about the environment, which are about what's going wrong with our education systems. And the type of people the type of friendship that you have in those two kinds of conversations is different, right? And it's important to really enable high schoolers to have those intellectual conversations because it brings a lot of depth into their relationship.
So what about the duration of the program? Is it going to be a week long? Is it people are going to come and stay somewhere? Like high school is a tough time. People don't have a lot of time. So how do they engage? How do they work with this team of faculty?
So this program is a 6-week program. So you have 3 weeks, then a 1-week break, and then another 3 weeks. And they're all seminar-style discussions. So you are in a cohort of up to just 16 students. It might be a lot less than that because we're very selective about who we take. You've got to have the curiosity and drive to engage with us over a prolonged duration. And that is honestly the curiosity and drive that will also get you into a really good college. So if you're interested in sort of going to a good college, this is a good program for you to demonstrate that you have that curiosity and ambition to kind of do this. The way it works is that we have the first 3 weeks, which are focused on academics and real-world problems. So in the first 2 weeks, we help you develop some fundamental skills in reading texts, reading graphs, and reading scientific evidence. In the second week, we help you do 3 case studies. So one case study is in the area of economic inequality. The second is in the area of diversity and discrimination. Third is in the area of environmental change. And what happens in these sessions is that an expert who's currently actually working on these problems comes in and says, okay, take a specific case study. Let's look at data sources from different subjects and use those data sources to understand what's really going on the ground in these situations. So what we've done for you in the first 2 weeks is helped you develop some fundamental skills that you need to do any kind of good thinking. Then we've shown you how to use data from different subjects to address real world problems. And then in the third week, which is super exciting, you have to now put all of that learning into use to start exploring a problem that you are passionate about. And over those first 2 weeks on the weekends, we're actually doing individual mentoring with you for 2-3 hours in total, where we're helping you narrow down what that problem that you want to explore is. And we call that the purpose problem. And the way that that works is we start off by asking you, okay, what are your subjects of interest? What are some things in the real world that you're passionate about? Are there any links between them? Like if you're interested in economics and your real world interest is, for example, slow fashion, people might not think that those are exactly related because people just associate slow fashion with environment.
Right.
But actually, of course, you need to have a good understanding of economics to be able to understand the industry of slow fashion.
Sure.
And frankly, most disciplines can be related in some kind of way to most other real world issues, simply because everything is so related in general. So now in the third week, you start really exploring your own problem that you care about. And in the second 3 weeks, what we do is that we shift the focus from academics and real world research to personal reflection, writing, and presentation. So in the 5th week, after that 1-week break in the middle, you actually go into small groups of just 4 students and you have these open conversations about what in my life experiences, personal life experiences, have actually brought me to even choose this issue. You know, what are the things that I grew up seeing around me that have moved me? And how does my upbringing and my privilege and my background, or whatever your background is, inform the way I might be considering to address that issue? Because you might not be the one facing the issue. So let's say you're a man who comes up with gender wage gaps as an issue. You have to think about what it means for you to be a male speaking about that issue.
Right.
And if you're a woman who has come up with gender wage gap as your kind of purpose problem, then you also need to figure out, okay, what type of woman am I and what type of women does the gender wage gap really affect? There's a high chance that the gender wage gap affects people who are of much lower income than you, and you need to be aware of that. So that's very important. And then we help you kind of write your discoveries out into something that can help you kind of just be your guide in terms of choosing extracurriculars, projects, etc. It becomes a lot smoother after that. And you also get you to present.
So at the end of 6 weeks, what do people walk out with?
At the end of 6 weeks, people walk out with a lot more clarity on their interests and strengths, so that they can choose what topics they want to do their projects, research papers, etc. on. And that's very, very important because you need your application to a university to be entirely coherent. You can't have a research paper on some random topic in biology and then have a project on another random topic even in biology. Just because they're both in biology doesn't mean they're coming together. you have to have, and they could be in two completely different areas, and they could still come together. So for example, if you're saying you're interested in slow fashion, you can have a research paper on the economics of the fashion industry, and you can have a project where you are analyzing the history of fashion design. And those are different things, the economics and the design, but they, at least they're related to your actual interest, which is slow fashion.
Okay, okay, that's
So it's very important to make choices about what you do for profile building in a coherent way. And the only way to do it in a coherent way is to really know for yourself, what am I interested in, what are my strengths are, and then proceed from there, rather than backwards.
got it.
Yeah.
So since it's almost starting their spark, it's almost starting a beginning of what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
It has to be young kids. I'm assuming this is not a 12th grader
No.
who's doing his applications.
No.
And because a lot of times people say, oh, let me go and do this 6-week program, I'll get a certificate, I'll show it to the college, and I'll say, okay, I'm done. So this is not that, right? This is, you got to be young. This is almost igniting the spark. This is showing your passion and starting you on a particular journey. So A, what age group are you thinking about? And B, when they leave from here, what's your advice for them after these 6 weeks?
Right. No, absolutely. So the age group for this program is grade 10 and 11. That's really the sweet spot. Overall, it's a program that's really an early intervention program, right? It's a program that helps you figure out what you're interested in, choose your topics of interest, and then do all the activities that you want to do to build your profile.
Got it.
So it's best to do this early. Once you do this program and you leave with a clarity on the choices that you want to make in terms of your topics that you want to study,
Sure.
Once you do this program and you're clear about the topics you want to study, then you should figure out the form in which you want to pursue that topic.
Okay.
So you could be like, okay, I want to do a research paper, but you could also pursue that topic through sort of a creative project, or you could also pursue that topic through a magazine you write about it. And you need to figure out which one you are most interested in and which one you think will create the most impact.
So at the end of it, you will perhaps, hopefully, have clarity about the topic that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And then there are multiple options of how to progress in that area. And you're saying 10th, 11th. 10th seems like even more suitable. But what about even younger? What about 9th? What about 8th? Maybe kids are too young. I don't know what the right answer is. But I'm again thinking aloud that isn't it better the sooner you do it,
Yeah.
the more you can learn and the more time you have to now progress that area of interest.
Right. No, absolutely. I think we should be looking at younger audiences as well, and I'm very excited too. So firstly, in this program, we do admit some 9th grade students who are truly exceptional. And when we say that, okay, I'm going to say that again. In this program, we do admit some students who are in the 9th grade. And frankly, with them, what we really need is to just be sure that this program is not going to go over their head. So, because we're getting professors who are from, quite a lot of, high senior level. And the high schooler needs to be able to actually be able to understand the content.
Right.
So they should have good grades.
Right.
And I'm not a big fan of, grades being kind of the determiner of everything. But in addition to curiosity and drive, the 9th graders should have a little bit of awareness of how graphs work and how language works, because we will be using all of that in class.
Right.
We will also offer programs for younger students, especially grades 7, 8, maybe even 6, maybe a little bit of 9. But I think those programs are going to be more about helping students build certain fundamental skills and giving them a fundamental base of knowledge about the world, rather than finding their purpose and their topics of interest at that earlier stage. It's more about giving them skills and giving them content. Later on, you can kind of start thinking about your areas of interest. So we have 3 programs that we're really excited to launch for younger kids, probably grades 7, 8, maybe a little bit of 9. One is in reading. When you go to college, you're going to be expected to read a lot, and we're really bad at reading.
Oh, yeah.
We are just not taught how to read.
Absolutely.
At all. Yeah. And that's really bad, because then we can't understand each other.
Yeah.
And then we can't even know whether we are communicating ourselves well, because we can't properly read our own writing.
Right.
So reading is important. I think math is really important. I've spoken to a lot of people who who are experienced in this space, and they told me that India's got great kind of engineers, but they're not that innovative. And I think what's really important is for all of us to have a very foundational understanding of how math and language works in order to be able to code properly. So I think math is something that I really would like to offer for younger students. And finally, a course kind of on kind of the history of the world, sort of like a Yuval Noah Harari course. How did the Big Bang happen? What is the history of humans? What does it mean for us to have a political society? Why are we so crazy? These are all things that, would be really nice to have a course. It's more of a crash course on the history of the world. So that's what we'll offer for grade 7, 8, 9.
So you do believe we are crazy?
I think we're insane. And we have no idea. I mean, but I don't blame us. Like, we're alive, and there's no clear reason why. So we must be a bit lost as to how to understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Wow. This is so much of insightful thoughts from a top grad from a top college. And it clearly shows how you're not just focused on, I want to start a business, I want to make money, let's get people in, let's churn out some certificates so they can show them to the colleges. You seem like you're genuinely wanting to shape the world and how people are thinking and how today's teenagers are shaping their future, helping them find a passion. Is that the core of who you are and what your thoughts are?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I believe in liberal education. And what I mean by that is education that should help you become a liberated individual, and also give you some liberty to pursue the questions that you're interested in.
Wow. So tell me, you will, I mean, I don't know initially, but at some stage, I'm sure a lot of people are going to apply for these kind of courses because I can tell you, people don't know what they want to do. Parents don't know how to help their children. Children don't even know which college to apply to, forget what their passion is. They're told, don't worry about passion, just do computer science.
Yeah.
So when a lot of people apply to you, how do you plan to pick? Will you take everybody? Will you select some students? Like, what's the process of students coming to you and working with you and your team?
I think that the most important qualities that we look for in students is curiosity and drive. If you're able to be someone who can have a conversation on really any topic, this is the program for you, because we're going to have a conversations on a lot of different topics that we decide as a team and bring instructors to teach, but also that you decide as a student as your passion problem, and every other student in the cohort decides as well. And we're going to have to, expect you to be able to push your peers on topics that they are interested in.
Sure.
So you need to be someone who's interested in a lot of things. And in terms of drive, you have to hold yourself to a high standard. You should not do this program if you don't want to aspire to become a stronger version of yourself than you are today. That's really important to us.
So don't do it just to get into a college. Do it to become a better version of yourself.
Definitely, definitely. Okay, so in the Gita, there is this line where Krishna speaks about how you should not be attached to the fruit, but rather to your dharma. And if you do your dharma properly, then you will get the fruit. It's like that. If you're going to be so obsessed with college admissions, which is in this case the fruit, then you're not going to do your dharma and you're not going to get the fruit. But if you do your dharma, which is, you doing what you're meant to do, or as far as you understand what you're meant to do and want to do, and everything that aligns with who you are, then you're going to be fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Very profound. What a statement. Krishna says, don't worry about the end result. Just do your job. Just do your karma and dharma and just focus on that. And the end result will automatically happen. And that's what you're saying. This is phenomenal for somebody of your age
Really?
to say such profound things. I'm telling you, this is phenomenal. Great stuff. I believe there is a strong need, there is a huge need in our society. Of course, for college admissions and all that, these things will help. Like you said, focus on your dharma and the fruit will come. So I think that requirement is there for college admissions anyways.
Yeah.
But even beyond that, like you rightly said, this will produce better humans. This will produce better adults. Programs like yours will help people find their passion. It'll help them focus on just what they want to do and do it well and forget about what will help me make more money.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can make money from anything today.
You can.
And as long as you do it well.
Yeah.
I mean, recently newspapers have been flooded with how many IITs haven't had jobs for their graduates, how many IIMs haven't had jobs for their graduates. So it's not like you do one thing and you can make the pot of gold. You can do anything, but do it well.
Yeah.
And finally, you'll get the pot of gold. And so I think this is a great thing you're doing. But I'm so glad somebody is taking these steps. I hope more people do it because you will not be able to take care of the entire market. There's just so many people in India who need this. So my best wishes to you.
Thank you.
And I hope to stay connected and send a lot of people your way because this is required. And I hope a lot of those people get admissions into your programs and learn from you and the great people that you're putting together from these top colleges. Thank you so much for taking out the time today.
Thank you so much.
It was an absolute pleasure to speak with you, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will have more questions, and we'll put your details under the video so that they can reach out to you. If you're okay with that, we can put your email ID or your number or whatever you're comfortable with. But and I'm not saying this for the video, but genuinely, I think it's a great piece of work that you're doing.